Having to double back on my route several times to avoid anyone following me is normally quite easy. Unfortunately, this wasn't my town, and I had to avoid walking down alleyways that I didn't know what was down there. After multiple turns and trips and checking, I concluded I was not being followed. I headed home. Once I checked all the doors, windows, and camera feeds to make sure nobody had entered my house, I could rest easy again. This was still a foreign country, and all my resources and experience was back in England. I eventually got to sleep later that night after doing my best to hack into the cameras at the tea shop. I wanted to get a clear picture of that guy, run a facial recognition search to see who he was. My morning was filled with questions bouncing around my head. Who was he, and what else did he already know about me? If I was targeted to buy one of their properties, then I must be intriguing to them. I racked my brain as to why I was just a semi-typical Londoner. I knew a few dodgy people, had done a few remissible things, and now had a lot of money. I would have thought, if I was to be targeted by anyone, it would be scammers, not what appears to be an intelligence agency. I contacted my solicitor again, as he seemed to have fingers in pies that I did not. I told him all that had happened with Jason and this new mystery man who he works for. He went silent on the video call for so long I checked the connection 3 times to make sure it was frozen. When he eventually spoke, he just told me to be careful and maybe head back to London for my own safety. That worried me. This guy has been my legal guy for a while now and knows all about my past misdemeanors back home. Him telling me to be careful and get back to London was the big flashing neon sign I needed to listen to. He messaged me directly about an hour later, saying I should leave by car and drive back into France as it would be safer than flying. Being warned not to fly by someone you actually trust and has your best interest in mind. It makes you nervous. I took his advice and packed what few things I had in the apartment and headed for the car park. A few calls to the property management company had them all in place to look after it until I returned. During my spending spree to establish myself here, I'd picked up a car. It wasn't a flashy sports one or anything that stood out. A half-decent motor with a few luxurious add-ons. As I drove out of the complex, I noticed another car immediately pull out behind me and begin to follow me. They were trying to stay out of the obvious range and remained at least 4 car lengths back at all times, but I knew they were there. I took a few twists and turns that upset the sat-nav to make sure I wasn't just being paranoid, and right on cue they turned as well. Without knowing who they were, I couldn't just go to the police. I assumed that the man who Jason answered to had police in his pocket to avoid that problem. I slammed my foot down on the gas pedal and poured off towards the border. As I got to the checkpoint, I asked the guard to help me as I was being followed by a car planning on hijacking my vehicle. He stepped back and eyed my car, raising an eyebrow as he did. It was almost like he didn't believe me, as who would want to risk such a thing for a car they could buy? After I went through, I could see in my mirror he stopped them, had them out of the vehicle. I could only hope he delayed them long enough for me to disappear. I drove all day and most of the night avoiding main roads and taking a scenic tour back. Needing to stop and rest, I searched for a local hotel or something. Out in the countryside, there wasn't much. I found an abandoned chateau off a dirt track and decided I could park there and sleep in the car. The night was wild and full of surprises. Never really been one to believe in ghosts, but the sounds that seemed to echo around my car did have me questioning that belief. With my driver's seat reclined all the way back, I tried to sleep, but each time I closed my eyes, the sound started. At first it was just a distant howl, like the wind blowing through hollow trees. Then it was the gravels around my car crunching as if someone was walking towards me. I sat up looking around for any signs of life in the darkness. Nothing appeared to be there. I heard a light squeak, as if someone was slowly trying to open the boot of the car. I felt the back end lift slightly. I yelled out, "Who's there?" But no answer. I remember seeing the windows begin to ice up, as if something was pushing cold air across them. It was all too much for me at that point, so I started the car, all the lights flicked on, and I tried to drive away. The front wheels span in place, and the front of the car dipped down as if someone was holding me in place. I slammed it in reverse and the car shot backwards. Re-engaging first gear, I drove out of the grounds at speed. I drove erratically for about 30 minutes before my heart slowed its beating, and the feeling of needing sleep kicked back in. I saw a small town up ahead and pulled into a roadside motel. It was run down, the kind of place you would likely catch hepatitis off by touching it. Yet I had no choice but to check if they had a room. I stopped the car and went in. The reception had a bar that was still open. After the spooky encounters I had, I sure needed a drink. After getting the last room available, I went straight to the bar. The temptation to get a large scotch was intense, and after downing at least 3 in quick succession, I started to feel normal again. It was here I met her, the woman I last remember talking to before waking up in this basement. She was at the bar alone, and as we started talking, I told her about my encounter that night. She told me that place is cursed. I don't know why. Maybe it was her seductive French accent that made it sound all the more alluring. I asked her more about it, and she told me the last owners had died in a fire, and their daughter went missing. Since then it's been a cursed place.